My name is Dave Wichland. I'm from the Keene, New Hampshire area. I got into mushrooms because of a piece of land that we kind of have, which is 250 acres, and it's got lots of little trees growing up. And I started studying agroforestry, was a college graduate in ecotourism and biology, spent a lot of time as a mountain guide, and always kind of had a fascination with mushrooms. It was, they're everywhere, they're very, but I really didn't understand how much everywhere they really are. And I had the pleasure of taking a nice permaculture design course with Steve, did a little presentation for them, and I've done some permaculture course instruction for some other classes that Steve's had at Colby Sawyer in different spots. Been up to DAcres here, I think it's my 4th or 5th time. And I just like to teach people about mushrooms and mycelium. So here is a little bit about mushrooms. Last year's mushroom forests. This is lion's mane. Grows on beech trees in our forest. It's a saprophyte. Morels. They grow underneath apple trees, and like elm trees, and ash trees. They're kind of mycorrhizal. This is elm oyster. Apsygus ulmarius. Very pretty white mushroom. Berkeley polypore. Probably one of the largest polypores in the forest. Can grow to be like 100 pounds in size. They're not a great edible, but it's just survival edible. They're just huge. Hen of the woods. This is another huge polypore. Can get to be 100 pounds at times. This is considered to be the most, has the most life force energy of any soft mushroom. It's actually best for the human body, excellent for nursing mothers, helps to fight cancer in the body, and grows underneath oak trees. And there was quite a few hens last year. That might be a Berkeley, black staining polypore, that one. This is some more elm oyster, decomposing a Norway maple stump. That was inoculated by Dave Jackie. Nice. This is garden giant. It's another saprophyte that you can actually grow in your garden. Stropharia rugosi, it's called. Beautiful, beautiful. It has a floral flavor to it. Almost tastes like eating flowers, but a mushroom flower. A lot of hens. They're so pretty. Now I grow lion's mane on wood chip blocks, which are a really nice way to do it. You grow them in your basement, in a mushroom grow house. Yeah. Delicious. Really nice. You're going to eat some today.
Nice.
Yeah. I had this awesome, huge one that I've been growing out to get really huge for this course, and it fell off the bag on the way out.
No way.
I still got the mushroom, but the bag, look at that. That was probably like at least 100 pounds worth of hen of the woods right there.
Oh my gosh.
I've filled the back of a pickup truck with hen before. And this is what takes care of most people's houses. Mycelium. Mycelium is really what we're talking about when we talk about mushrooms. The mycelium is 95% of the life of the mushroom.
What do you mean take care of the houses?
Eat some. Makes them disappear. So, mycelium is considered to be the like the grid molecular disassembler. Breaks everything down. Anything wet and moist and full of wood or detritus, it can break it down. the leading, most powerful decomposer on Earth, the mushroom. There's the mushroom logs and stumps right here. Farm up in Roxbury, New Hampshire, where I inoculated 40 yards of wood chips and made this giant bunker spawn pile that the farmer then used to help make soil in a really rocky area, and he inoculated around all of his apple trees and his peach trees and his orchard to be. And there's no sign that there's any wood chips anymore. It's gone. That was 2 years ago, and they're gone.
What mushroom was that?
This is chicken of the woods.
And the wood chip pile?
Oh, there was like 7, 8 different species. Yeah. Why spend a lot of money grinding down stumps when you can just inoculate them and let Mother Nature grind them down for you? Humans need to become better earth makers. We're great earth takers, but we're not great earth makers. So we need to kind of understand what earth is made and how it's made on earth. And if we actually delve back to as far back in geological timetable as there ever was, where did soil come from? Where did it come from? Anyone have any answers?
Who's here?
No, maybe not. Something had to build the soil.
Lichen?
You're in that realm.
Algae.
It was fungus. It pretty much broke down minerals, etc.
Yeah,
Right?
mycelia is one of the only organisms on the face of the world that can actually physically eat rock. So what is mycelium? Well, here's a little block of mycelium right here. This is actually a block of mycelium created by a company out of New York called Ecovate. And this is such a cool thing. They're making mushroom packaging material now. Or it's really mycelium packaging material right there. But this is mycelium. And if we actually look on it on an even more scientific scale, we can look at mycelium on a petri dish right here. That's mycelium on a petri dish. This is how a mushroom farmer actually expands mushrooms. We actually grow mycelium out onto agar, which is basically vegetabilized gelatin, and we actually expand the mycelium from different substrates to each other so that they can continue to expand and grow. Well, mycelium is a bundling of rhizomorphic hyphae. That's all kind of crazy. Well, what is that? It's basically a webulous, strenulous mass that actually covers about every square inch of soil of outside world there is on Earth. And it is now considered to be the largest organism on the planet. And the theory is that mushrooms, which are only 5% of the life of the mycelium, are the basically the flower of the mycelium. And the flower itself throws out spores. Well, these spores can go through asexual go through asexual reproduction. And because of that asexualness to their character, spores can remain dormant for millions to even billions of years. So the theory is that spores probably rained in on Earth from comets, asteroids, meteorites, beyond, and over millions upon millions of years, that which could eat rock built subcellular mycelial soils on the rock, interfacing with the oceans, amino acids, algae, other things. Life started to spring forth. It's a great theory. But they do know that every plant on Earth has a naturally occurring mycorrhizal relationship with a mycelia. Lichens don't exist on rocks without mycelial soil being there. Moss is the same thing. In the world of mushrooms, there's basically 3 families. There's saprophytes, there's mycorrhizals, and then there are parasites. And mostly saprophytes are what mushroom farmers actually try to utilize. This is saprophytic because it's most abundant that we can actually just break stuff down. Wood, straw, coffee grounds, compost, bodies. Mushrooms can eat flesh.
Which mushroom is that?
Pretty much most primary decomposers can eat it. If your body's in the ground, it's going to eventually move into you. But But the great thing about mushrooms is they're kind of involved with everything. You know, they're involved with the insects, they're involved with the bacteria, they're involved with the molds. They are all interdependent upon each other. It just happens to be that the mycelia kind of is that really the core that really helps out those other organisms to actually do what they do as well. So this right here is the garden giant. That's the Stropharia rugosa, and that's a really nice mycelia. And there's some nice mycelia that I'll pass around here. One of the great ways to expand mycelia is actually to expand it onto cardboard. Let me see this right here. Myceliated cardboard. You can actually just take a little stem bud of the mushroom and put it right on the cardboard, keep it moist, and the mycelium will jump from the actual mushroom to cardboard. And then you could actually just call this a mother culture and expand it out into your gardens. You can see the mycelium, you can fold it out here, you can see all the various aspects. This cardboard is only 2 weeks old, and you can see how much mycelia has already started to spread on it. It's just amazing.
So how did you start that? Just by wetting the cardboard?
I just wet the cardboard. I either took some mycelia that I grew out, or in some cases I actually take a physical mushroom, cut the very bottom of the stem off, and pull up the mycelium from the ground as I'm picking it, and then I just kind of transplant the mycelium so that I can expand the mycelium to other areas. Mycelia in mushrooms are species of limitations. They are limited by the amount of food that they are in and around. So when mycelia feels like it is kind of threatened by the amount of food that it has to eat, it will throw up a fruiting body. And the fruiting body is the easy way for mycelia to throw out its spores. Otherwise, mycelia just has to crawl throughout the ground and just kind of weave and move and just kind of eat. And mycelia creates acids and enzymes through its external stomach. And the external stomach actually surrounds, and in some cases, encapsulates. This is all mycelia, encapsulating wood chips. There's kind of two mushrooms in the mushroom farming realm that really do this well. One of them are reishi, and the other one is shiitake. And this is a shiitake block of a physical fruiting mushroom, mycelia, and then it happens to be just lucky enough that you can just see the wood chips on top. Right there. So this mycelia is limited to the amount of nutrients that it can uptake. So that's why something small like this is a good way for a mushroom farmer to actually try to get as many different crops of, say, a mushroom from something small like this, as opposed to inoculating a whole entire tree, which it might take a while for that tree to get filled with enough mycelium that the mycelium even feels like it's time to actually create a fruiting body. And basically what a mushroom is the mycelia bundles itself into a tight little ball, and then it just kind of blossoms the individual mushroom.
So what is inside of this mycelium?
Just wood chips,
So
surrounded
mycelium
and spread all throughout by mycelia.
So how thick is that layer of mycelium?
Oh, it's all the way through.
Oh, it is all the way through.
But it just happens to be that certain particular mushrooms have that ability to actually surround and like hold on to it. And it's so tight that I have these blocks that are so small and so tight now that you actually can't break them apart. That mycelia is so bonded to the substrate. Yeah. So this is another thing. This is a birch stump, and the birch stump is actually fruiting two different types of mushrooms. You don't have to just plant one type of mushrooms and call it all monoculture. Polyculture is a big word in permaculture. Polyculture is 2 different, 3 different, 4 different things going on. And in Mother Nature, you find so much else going on. It's not just one thing. So if you want to inoculate stuff, do a bunch of different things. You know, sometimes you can inoculate different things that come at different times of the year, so that you actually have spring mushrooms, summer mushrooms, fall mushrooms in concert with your plants as well. And the guardian of the mushrooms is the gnome, right there. So we can move on. I'm definitely...
Tell me how far you went.
So growing mushrooms in the forest canopy and in your gardens, plants and mushrooms can be best friends. So kind of gives you a little description of mushrooms in your forested landscape, how to make mushroom beds underneath the forest canopy, looking at tools and techniques to incorporate mushrooms in your flower beds in your gardens, and how to work with mushrooms to bring, how to work within your own landscape to bring mushrooms into your world. So this is a garden giant. This is a saprophyte, like I was saying before. Saprophytical mushrooms actually do not bring down plants generally. They generally will feed on the primary decomposition that is happening. Leaf matter that comes down, branches that come down, straws, cereal grains, wood chips. Pretty much you can grow saprophytical mushrooms in your gardens. And certain mushrooms have saprophytical properties, but then have slight mycorrhizal properties as well. And mycorrhizal mushrooms are mushrooms that actually live in pure harmony with the plants or the environment that they're in. And in the world of mycorrhizae, there's endomycorrhizae and ectomycorrhizae. Ectomycorrhizae actually surround the root system of plants, and endomycorrhizae actually penetrate and go inside the core of the plant itself, like lady slippers. All orchids have ecto and endomycorrhizal properties that are going on. So there's mycelia that actually lives in harmony, passes in and out, and the mycelias actually create acids and enzymes that break down the lignous matter that's around and also break down the sugars that the plants actually secrete. Those acid enzymes then are released as byproducts from the mycelia, and the mycelia then actually sits there, hangs out, does its thing, and the mycelia, through the ectomycelia, mycorrhizae, actually begin to feed the plant. And then so they work kind of together, in concert as one another. It's really kind of cool. Mushrooms will grow on logs, they'll grow on stumps, the remnants of the logging industry, they'll grow on wood chips. So you think about here in New England, we have a lot of trees, and we have a lot of tree service companies. There's a lot of places where you can just get pure, free wood chips. Predominantly, we would like to use hardwood wood chips. Pinus species are really not that great in your garden. They're very high in tannins, acids, and actually they're really great for rhododendrons, they're really great for blueberries, but they're not really great for, say, tomato plants, potato plants, that sort of thing. But hardwood species are not as acidic. And actually the mycelia breaks it down so very fast. So that by the time you release wood chips into your garden, if they're predominantly hardwood, there can be a mix of softwoods in there, but the pure pine family, it takes a while for it to break down. There are mycelias out there that do break down pine, but there's not a lot of mycelias out there that break down pine that are good for us to eat in the garden. In the forest, where the most poisonous mushrooms are generally in high gymnosperm forests. Spruces, firs, pines, hemlocks, those generally are where most of the most poisonous mushrooms are. And this is hen of the woods. This is elm oyster. Really, really nice mushrooms, and they're also both saprophytes that have symbiotic properties. So, kind of, we'll get into right off the bat about logs and stumps. In order to inoculate a log, I would like a fresh cut log. Why do I want a fresh cut log from the forest? Yeah, there's over 3,500 different species of mushrooms that grow in our eastern forest alone. So that's a lot of different mycelias. And you think all those mycelias produce, in theory, a mushroom, and that mushroom very well may, when it throws out its spores, may create anywhere from 3,000 to 1,000,000 spores at one distribution time. So if I go out and find old, dead, decomposing wood out in the woods, there's a reason why it's dead and decomposing. So I would like to use relatively fresh cut logs. Fresh cut logs, oak, maple, beech, ash, hop hornbeam, pretty much any of the hardwoods are best for long-term mushroom growth. If you want quicker results, getting faster mushrooms, you can use a softer hardwood like birch or beech or ash, poplar, and sometimes as we go north, there's a few other species up around here that sometimes we don't have in kind of the southern part. Some of the poplars, the big tooth poplar, I think one's called, and there's many other species as well. But when you're thinking about it, the softer, aspen, local aspen is very soft too. The very soft mushrooms, the very soft logs, they break down quite quickly, so you might get a crop 3 to 5 years. Or an oak, you could get a crop for as much as 8 to 10. Hop hornbeam, they say even longer. And so I like to, when I'm actually inoculating, yes sir?
Is there a certain time of year that's best to cut those logs?
It is best to cut the logs in the times that the sap is in the wood or in the roots. That is optimal. It will work, but the very best is when the leaves are off the tree. That is the best. Because all the sugars are in the root or in the wood. They're navigating up, or they're navigating down, or they're kind of in between. And that just gives more of a leg up for the mycelia to become the dominant organism inside that tree. So I like to use logs when I'm inoculating that are 3 to 4 foot in length and say 4 to 14 inches in diameter. And I like to use these little wooden plugs to inoculate my logs. These plugs, and this is a mycelia block right here, but I have a couple plugs in there. You can see different mycelias. So I put the hardwood plugs that have been inoculated in the tree so that you can actually get the mycelia to spread and start breaking down the wood so you can get future mushrooms fruiting. And your stumps are one of the best sources to inoculate. Because you think a stump was a large tree at one point. And they do say that often as large as a crown of a tree, the root system can be as large as well, if not even bigger. So there's all that mass, there's all that capillary action of wicking up into the tree, so inoculate your stumps. And it can become a real cool art kind of experiment, just something different in your woods by leaving your stumps 3, 4, 5 feet off the ground and inoculating them. Yes, sir.
I have a property that's been logged years ago.
Yep.
What about those stumps, the old stumps? Nothing? Can you do anything with them?
You can sit on them.
No. So you can't inoculate an old stump?
You can. It just, whether I'm just putting one grain of corn in the middle of a field of grass. Kind of understand that? Yeah, you can. And there's certain mushrooms that are a little bit more hardy in that sort of environment, like the hen of the woods, is considered to be one of those mushrooms that you can actually inoculate around or beside a stump. Maybe you'll get some hen fruiting. I just equate it to, if you're going to spend good money on spawn, in order to get a good fruiting, good return, and make you want to do more mushroom farming, it's probably better to go get the fresh ones. But sometimes, if you've had a piece of property that's been cleared a while ago, you might have a bunch of stump sprouting going on.
Well, I didn't know. I'm going to check now.
Yeah, you might have a bunch of stump sprouting going on. So you might have little stumps coming all off, and then you can girdle all those stumps and then try to inoculate all those new suckers that are coming up. So yeah, stumps, shiitakes, oysters, hen of the woods, chicken of the woods, lion's mane, those are all good that you can inoculate stumps with. And all the wood chips that's created from the tree harvesting industry in this state can actually be inoculated. You can make forest garden beds, you can make perennial garden beds, you can make just mushroom beds. You can just keep on layering these wood chips into your garden. Wood chips are better to bring into your garden than, say, bark mulch. Most of the bark mulch people get are dyed. You know that red bark mulch you see? It's a dye that's in there. The black, it's another dye. And they mix in other stuff that isn't even bark mulch. And really, bark mulch is just for utility. People like to see black or red or help to keep down the weeds, but it really doesn't do much to help your garden. So, I think wood chips are great, and it makes black earth. So there you go. You don't even need to put in black chips. So yeah, I love to use wood chips. It's one of my best things. I always cringe when I see a homeowner having trees removed, and they take all wood chips away. I'll be like, why don't you just put that back in your gardens? But gotta get that through people's heads. So we can move on. So here's a couple nice mushrooms on stumps. We do have some trees around here that are invasive. Well, what a better thing to actually try to take care of your invasives by inoculating them with elm oyster. This is a Norway maple that was growing. It ended up falling through a hurricane, and we cropped it off and left the stump high, and it's been fruiting now for like 7 years. We bought the house in 7, and the stump is pretty much gone. 6 years, 7 years, and it's a good sized stump. Gone. I mean, you can just push it over. And the cool thing is that, the mycelium gets up, it creates fruiting bodies, it slowly works off the bark, and then as this whole thing comes to concerts, you get insects that come in, you get bacteria and molds and woodpeckers and things like my boys going around and ripping off bark and, whacking each other with it. It's good fun. And this is lion's mane, and lion's mane grows on beech trees. And it's a beautiful mushroom to grow in the fall, and it's another beautiful mushroom to do what they call totem culture. And totem culture is just basically stacking little ends of logs on top of each other and just putting a little bit of mycelium in between the two ends. And we'll do some totem culture this afternoon, I believe. So we can move on to the next one. This is logs. We like to use a 5/16 brad point bit. Like I said, we like to use logs that are 4 to 14 inches in diameter, 3 to 4 foot long. When you're doing inoculation of logs and stump, if you're doing a lot of them, it's really nice to do it on a nice platform yourself, on a table. I have lots of folks that kind of want to do it on the ground, but boy, that hurts your back after a while. So, you've got nice long-term investment in a future crop. Growing mushrooms is a little bit on logs, kind of like asparagus. It might take a little bit to start, but once you get them going, you should have mushrooms for a while. And I drill my holes 1 to 2 inches apart in kind of a diamond fashion on the log, and I just pound those little plugs in, and there you go. And you don't necessarily have to use plugs. You could just use wood chip spawn, and you could also do what they call the spore bath slurry method. And the spore bath slurry method is really great for permaculturists to try to introduce mycorrhizal species into your garden. And we'll do this afternoon, but basically we take a 5-gallon bucket like this, we fill it with kind of maybe lukewarm water, I throw a mushroom in that's so desirable, I put in like a cup or two of molasses or honey or caro syrup or some sort of cheap sweetener. So by putting the mushroom in there, the mushroom's whole purpose in the world is to release spores. And the spores in this spore bath slurry have sugars to eat. And the sugars go through asexual reproduction, and then you get this spore bath slurry that say I maybe found some chanterelles, and I want to see if I can get some chanterelles growing in my garden. I can actually just take this bucket now, after about 24 hours, and broadcast it out into my garden. Didn't cost me anything. I found the mushrooms in the forest, and I put them out there. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, maybe it takes a couple years. Maybe I want to try to expand my already known morel patch I have, so I do that with morels. Say I have logs, and I don't have plugs, but I found a bunch of shiitakes in the woods or something. I went to DAcres and I snuck some of his shiitakes off his log and threw them in the bucket. So maybe I broadcast them on a bunch of logs to see what happened. So that's kind of the theory on the original mushroom farming, was that a log, all of a sudden someone noticed a fresh log, old log, all of a sudden this log was fruiting mushroom, and then this one was. And then maybe by chance, there was some water and mushroom floating in it, and someone just broadcast something, and hey, look, mushrooms were there. So, it's really kind of, mycelia is kind of like a starter. You can keep on exponentially expanding it. So like this bucket then could be, instead of just going off and broadcasting the bucket out, we could actually take the bucket and actually magnify it in a term of 10. So we could take 10 more buckets full of a little bit of sweetener and broadcast it out. Because spores go through asexual reproduction. So all it does is need some more sugars to keep on eating and expanding. And so that's kind of the whole realm and the whole theory on mushroom farming out there, is that from a tiny, tiny little piece of mushroom or from spores, we could exponentially create 1 million pounds of mushrooms if you wanted to. It's really kind of cool.
So when you say in your garden, where in your garden?
Everywhere. They're already there. Mycelium is all throughout your garden. Mycelium covers just every square inch of soil on Earth. It is everywhere. You've got 80 different types of mushroom on you right now.
Okay.
I listened to. Did anyone hear the NPR article the other day on NPR? They had a show on fungus on the body.
I took a shower this morning. Doggone.
Doesn't matter. No, it loves water. It loves water.
Yeah, they, sugar.
They say worldwide the population of people can have as many as 80 different types of funguses on our body. And of course, where are the places where the most are? The feet. Because a lot of times they're covered. But fungus is cool. It helps clean. It helps clean you up. It helps ward off mites and other things that can be effective. There's not good fungus too. There's parasitics. But it's kind of a natural thing on Earth. They breathe oxygen. We breathe oxygen.
So it has no effect on my tomatoes or cucumbers. It only adds.
Well, there are mushrooms out there that have parasitical properties. So those ones, you might want to not release chaga into your garden. Right. But ones that have saprophytic or mycorrhizal properties are fine to actually release into your gardens. So we can pass on from here.
Oh, so with the bucket, you just throw the mushroom in with what? Just some wood chips and dirt, or not even that?
With the bucket
Yeah.
of liquid love?
Oh, so yeah.
Is that what you call it?
Yes.
Yeah, the bucket of liquid love.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you put dirt and.
No, actually, from this it's just liquid.
Okay, so just molasses and sugar.
Yep, we let it sit for like 24 hours, and then from there we can make garden beds underneath our plants. We can actually take wood chips and just broadcast that liquid love on there, the spore bass slurry.
Yeah.
You can also take cardboard, straw.
Yeah.
I'm doing a big potato experiment this year on my permaculture garden. Yep. I've already changed stuff. But, that's a base map, right? It's always changing. But actually, because of my permaculture course and having my little consult with the gal who lives down in Walpole there, I'm trying to remember her name. Was it Cynthia? Yeah. She took all this dirt, moved it aside, laid down cardboard. We put mycelium down. We put a little layer of wood chips, and then we shoveled a little bit of dirt on top of it. Then we planted potatoes. Then we took the dirt from the side, moved it in, and then took straw and stood it on the bias long ways, inoculated underneath the straw, folded it up, took the potatoes in between the two layers of straw, and then as it needs to be hilled, we'll throw a little bit more dirt on it. And at the end of the year, when the potatoes are ready, we'll push aside the straw and maybe not have to do as much digging. And then we can take the straw that's filled with inoculated elm oyster, and when I go to put my garden to rest at the end of the year, I can just put the straw all over the garden. And I mean, I've been using wood chips and straw in my garden for 12 years now. And I had a course last weekend up there, and I asked someone to go into the soil and see if they could find any wood chips. They couldn't. It's all dirt. It just becomes earth. And I've had years and years of, I probably put 50, 60 bales of straw into that garden. You can't see that there's any straw, you know. Now you can because I just did this new crop. But it really just breaks down. It decomposes. We want to put stuff in our garden that breaks down. That's what we are as farmers. We're breaker downers. We want to make soil, get good food. So this is a Norway maple with some crocuses, with some elm oyster underneath it. This is mycelia and wood chips. Like I say about mycelia, it has the ability to exponentially expand itself, and it's a creature of limits. So you can actually take one small thing of mycelia and inoculate like a big pile of wood chips. And then I could take that whole pile of wood chips and bring it into my garden. So it's like a starter.
Do you keep watering the wood chip pile?
If we have a long stint of no rain, I'd give it a little bit of rain. But the really cool thing about mycelium, because of its interconnectedness and because of its binding ability, it holds water in it. And there's has anyone heard of Paul Stamets from Fungi Perfecti?
No.
He's done all these big experiments with road crews and actually using mycelia to actually help to prevent erosion from happening. And they actually call it mycoremediation. Cleaning up roadside problems, sarin nerve gas agents. They've been finding mycelia can actually eat the remnants of oil. They have actually found mycelia in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They say it's unbelievable how much mushroom is growing around Chernobyl. Mycelia and mushrooms are creatures of catastrophe. It loves to actually have miles and piles of detritus, because then it's got lots to eat. And they do say at times on Earth that there has been massive catastrophe. Really, mushrooms have inherited the Earth. It had lots to eat, so why not?
So will it process creosote in soil?
I don't know that much about creosote and its agents for that. I would assume that it probably could. I make biochar, and lion's mane loves biochar. Just eats it right up. So that's a product of the burning agent, creosote, correct? So, I would assume that it could eat it.
So, just so I'm not confused here, you're making
Mycelium.
mycelium.
Yep. Which
for
makes
soil.
right.
You're not eating.
Well, there are people that do eat mycelium in grain form. There's a whole part of the industry now that is actually taking mycelium and growing it out on grains, and then just putting that in the encapsulation. Some even feel like there's more nutrients in the physical mycelium than there is actually in the mushroom itself. I'm not sure.
Just to clarify too, Angelo, I brought a lot of wood chips in for pathways as part of our project, and I had King Stropharia mushrooms come up. And I remember talking to Josh about it and identifying it and everything, and then meeting Dave. And so I started taking some of those wood chips, and when I bring other wood chips in, I'd take some of that and I'd mix it in.
Yeah.
And then I started doing the spore bath and spreading it. Now we have mycelium in the soil, but also fruiting King Stropharia. And all of the forest gardens and regular gardens, we've spread it throughout the property.
Yeah, so you only need to buy it once.
Right.
You create a mother patch.
Right. Being converted here.
That's kind of the principle behind some of what we're doing with compost. We do a 2-inch compost blanket as a replacement for 4 inches of molded seed on slope for erosion control. But that's a lot of the way it works. Is we're using a very coarse compost with a lot of wood fiber in it, and it's very actively growing. And then you put it on that slope, and that mycelium moves through that blanket, and locks that blanket down to the soil extremely quick.
It grows into the rocks
It grows
because it likes to eat rock.
We did. We had during the Mother's Day flood. We were doing a big 2-to-1 clay slope, and we were putting 2-inch compost blanket on it. We blow it on with the blower truck, so it's nice loose, and it really starts to activate pretty quickly. We had stuff that we did on Thursday before it started to rain. It stayed perfectly, and we blew Friday to try and protect the rest of the slope. After about 9.5 to 10 inches of rain, we lost that, and the catastrophic fell off. It just wasn't there long enough. But the compost and the fungi in the compost and that stuff that was there on Thursday was already actively, it was wicking water out of the slope and attaching it to that clay, and we had no movement through the entire Mother's Day flood on 2-to-1 slopes.
Nice.
It had been there for less than 36 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, just incredible things that you can do. Now, getting that across to engineers.
It's trial and error. It's working and seeing what doesn't work and experimentation. That's the whole root of all gardening. Can't be afraid to try and fail. So yeah, here's just a basic tree mushroom growing under it. And so let's talk a little bit about the saprophytes, mycorrhizals, and the parasites. The mycorrhizal species, like we're saying, are the most difficult to grow because they have a very special relationship with the soil and a tree and a bacteria and a yeast, or maybe all those things together. The head of the woods is actually a saprophyte that has mycorrhizal properties. So it actually will form a harmonious relationship with, say, an oak tree. And actually go endo and ecto inside the tree, and will actually create a fruiting body for years and years and years and years and years to come. And it is considered to be, they're considered to be one of the harder species to grow because they have kind of a unique environment. That said, the mushrooms in your forest that you find that seem to be the mycorrhizal ones are also excellent candidates to do the spore bath inoculation with as well. So this is the mycelium. You can see that right there on the PowerPoint there. It's fibrous, it's fluffy, it flows. It's underneath a microscope. It looks incredible. It's like a web, pure web. And like I said, it's 95% of the life. And to understand mushrooms, you have to understand mycelium first and what it does. And like I was saying before, it just breaks stuff down. It's the eater. Creates enzymes and acids that actually are secreted, and it eats from the outside in. And that's where the hard film of the block actually comes from after that, the shiitake block that we were passing around. And like I said earlier, mushroom mycelium is considered to be the grim molecular disassembler. We've got to become better soil makers because we seem to be taking a lot of soil away from this mother here. And we need to understand how nature works. And we seem to be kind of on that threshold right now. We kind of understand it. We see the chemical fertilizers and all that don't work. Our dumps are running out. We can't be putting stuff in the ocean anymore. So why not just break it all down and use it? Streams of cardboard, streams of paper. Move away from plastic consumable goods and make everything biodegradable if we can. I think it's the wave of the future, and you're seeing more and more of this happening, especially as natural resources become less and less consistent. So, we have all these, and the great thing about growing mushrooms is you have no waste stream. You can pretty much break down almost everything. Straw, agricultural waste products, manures, coffee grounds, things from your composts, things that are used to stick around and encourage the growth in your gardens. So this is what we call bunker spawn. This is actually taking a large pile of wood chips and actually making a lot of it. And this is great because you get to form a relationship with tree companies or people that are from a local coffee shop or people that have these waste streams out there that can actually help you to bring more livelihood into your gardens. And when you do inoculate large piles of wood chips, you actually want to make low, long piles instead of big, tall piles. Big, tall piles create thermogenesis. It creates heat. And that heat isn't quite so good for mushrooms. And you also, with big piles of wood chips, get thermogenesis, and that can sometimes create spontaneous combustion. There's a place down in Stoddard, New Hampshire called Carlisle Flooring, and they had a whole barn go up last year because they had been storing wood chips in massive piles in the middle of the summertime. The whole barn spontaneously combusted. Went up. It took like 2 days to get the fire out because it was so deep inside that massive pile of wood chips. They don't do that anymore. But this is a low pile. This is 2 to 3 feet high in a nice long row. And all I did is put the mycelium in between on the cardboard, and I mixed it in. And then after about a month or so, they went in and mixed those particular piles up, tried to get that mixing up as much as they could, and then they just broadcast it out to their gardens or around their plants or in their apple groves, peach groves, whatever they're trying to grow.
So did you just pour that? What you call
Well,
it?
I actually, because they're trying to get the mycelium to move quite quickly because they wanted to garden with it. I actually did direct mycelium. So they could actually have it there, they could see it. There wasn't a risk of it not working. Because they have an active farm and they really wanted to start making soil. I mean, they got like 3/4 of an inch of soil there. I mean, there's nothing. The soil is awful. So what they're doing is they're doing all raised beds, they're building everything up, they're doing one straw revolution, they're bringing in compost, they're bringing in wood chips, they're chipping, they're growing straw in their forest. They have these big fields that they've cleared, and they're growing their own straw, oat straw and rye straw. So they're trying to make soil as opposed to just keep on digging, looking for it. So that's what they've got. They've got a lot of trees. They have like 300 acres.
So there's a big difference in time as far as pouring it all out and doing it direct?
There is a big difference in time.
How much difference in time is there?
It's hard to say. Yeah, it's one is a cheap, poor man's inoculation method. I find a mushroom, I want to see if it works. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I have 50-50 chance of it working. Maybe I've used a mycorrhizal species that actually doesn't seem to like the matrix that I'm putting it into. But rest assured, by having a whole block of mycelium all ready to go, what I'm putting it in, it's already moving. It's already spreading. And now that I'm giving it more life, it will spread faster.
If you ground that up, does it affect the molecular? Do you have to? If you grind that up,
I disperse the mycelium.
You can ground that, won't affect it.
Yeah, I'll just take this and, grind it right up. I'm just spreading the mycelium. That's the thing about tilling, too. People, like I had a conversation with a guy yesterday who had a bunch of weeds in his yard. And he was like, I just want to till my whole yard and I'll take care of it. I was like, well, you might find that tilling actually makes it worse. A lot of kind of weedy plants have rhizomes, and those rhizomes have little nodes that are attached to all their root systems. So by tilling it up, you're just making like 100 plants. I'm kind of doing the same thing with mycelium.
So you're actually spreading the mycelium by breaking it down. Because I thought
That's
I
right.
had in my head
That's
you
right.
don't want to disturb the soil because then you'll break up the mycelium or you'll disturb the mycelium. But it's actually okay to disturb it if you want to expand it.
Yes. Yeah. And actually some mushrooms, mycelium really like to be disturbed. The Stropharia loves to be raked up a little bit, likes to be mixed up a little bit. I had a guy that he's doing a big bunker spawn. I sold him like 4 bags of Garden Giant spawn. He inoculated like 5 or 6 yards. And he said, I see all the mycelium is kind of spreading, but there's an area over there. I was like, well, just rake it into that. And he said, after the first rain, it was unbelievable how the mycelium just spread, just being moved a little bit. But you're thinking about, you're taking something and moving it to another area to give it more fresh nutrients. So yeah, and this is, example, wood chips is growing through, and then I planted the mycelium around, this is hardy kiwi right here, and then I put the mycelium around the hardy kiwi, and then I get a little nice garden giant, and then I get soil breaking down, and I can just keep on adding soil, wood chips, free, make soil instead of buying compost. It might be nice to get a little compost here and there, or just start your own compost pile, but compost is expensive. It's like $30-40 a yard, I can get wood chips free, or I get these special wood chips that I like for making pure cultures from a place called Tree Hugger Farms down in Westmoreland, New Hampshire. And I buy a yard for $10. And most of the time I just bring him a pack of mushrooms and he gives me them for free. So it's really kind of a barter. I love the barter. So you can see the different types. Nice Stropharia here, fruiting. Some nice more hen of the woods. Nice little crocus, has got the mycelia all around it. Developing mushroom beds, just think about it. All the different things you can use. You can use logs. I did a bunch of garden beds out of my wife's school. She teaches at the Surrey Village Charter School in Keene, New Hampshire, and we did a bunch of beds out of black locust. So black locust is kind of be there for a long time, but it still actually will eventually break down. So I put garden giant and Stropharia all around these little black locust pieces, and I can already see the mycelium moving in there. It's going to take a while, but that's kind of nice. You can put a stump there. It's going to take a while. But maybe I don't want the stump through the logs to stay long. I can use softer wood species like aspens or poplars or birches and let them just break down and just incorporate them into our beds. So let me pass around. It's a big wide world out there of mushrooms. Not everything you think about a mushroom would be what someone would think a mushroom would be. This is reishi. This is a saprophyte. This is a wonderful mushroom to actually break down hardwood stumps as Ganoderma lucidium or Ganoderma sugae. You can actually break down Pinus species with. This is Ganoderma sugae. They're both very powerful medicinal mushrooms, are considered to be some of the most medicinal mushrooms of all mushrooms. And these are polypores. And this polypore is actually doing something really interesting. This is a polypore that was hypomizing itself. A mother mushroom was growing on top of another mushroom, which is kind of unique in the mushroom world. Mushrooms will eat other mushrooms, which is really kind of cool. Has anyone heard of the lobster mushroom? Mm-hmm. Well, the lobster mushroom is a mushroom that eats another mushroom. The mycelium of the lobster mushroom has no form. The mycelium is just mycelium. But when the mycelium of the lobster mushroom actually goes endo into the mushroom, it actually turns a lactarius or a rusula into the lobster mushroom.
Crazy.
Which one mushroom is the lactarius and the rusula of the lobster mushroom to be before, when it's a lactarius or a rusula? It's an okay edible. It's okay. But once it's been lobsterized, or what they call hypomized, it becomes a delicacy mushroom. So, there's saprophytes, and then there are hypomizers, or in that same realm of hypomizizer is a parasite. And this is a parasitical mushroom. This is chaga. Chaga is a great mushroom for our bodies, but it's not a great mushroom for the body of the birch tree. This mushroom will take down birch trees.
Living birch trees?
Living birch trees, yeah. So, all plants have association with mushroom, but all plants also have some antifungal properties. Because if they didn't, nothing would be here. Mushrooms would eat everything. So plants have evolved, just like mushrooms have evolved, to be able to work in concert together. But of course, in the living world, we need to have primary, secondary, tertiary decomposers, and we need to also have things that help weed out the weak. And one of those mushrooms is, say, the chaga. And this is chaga. Pass this around, check it out. You ask most people, and they say, chaga? That's not a mushroom, that's burnt wood. Well, that's a mushroom, right there. You can see right there, the mycelium. Now, by taking off the chaga of the tree, am I preventing the nice mushroom from propagating itself? No, because the mycelium is still in the tree. So, I'm actually maybe helping the mushroom a little tiny bit so that the mushroom, helping the tree a little tiny bit so that the spores aren't released from these said mushrooms. Now, these mushrooms can live to be anywhere from 10 to 100 to 1,000 years. They have found artist conch, which is not a parasite, which is a saprophyte. They have found this mushroom to actually be 1,000 years old in the old-growth forests out in the Pacific Northwest. They have found artist conchs that were like 5-6 feet around, just huge, huge. So there are perennials that will also be saprophytes, and there are perennials that will be parasites. So you'll have these particular mushrooms that will continue to grow year by year, getting bigger and bigger and bigger until their host either runs out of nutrients or falls off or has something else that, say, eats it. Now, there are also annuals, which this is a lot of people say, well, that's a perennial, but no. The Ganoderma, the reishi, they're just 1 year's growth. Just 1 year's growth. They get really big, but that's just 1 year's growth. The hen of the woods is another polypore. It's 1 year's growth. This is a dryad saddle. This is one of the very first mushrooms that comes out in the spring, and this is another polypore. And one really cool thing about dryad saddle is it makes really cool paper. So you guys can pass this around. This is mushroom paper. The brown one is artist conch, and the blondish one is dryad saddle.
Dave, is that also pheasant back?
Pheasant back.
Yeah.
And some people like it. It's okay. It tastes like watermelon rind. Some people make pickled watermelon rind. Some people like that. Not quite as much of a fan. But I know my son Seth loves to eat the watermelon rind. Maybe it's the bitterness. So we've got some parasites. We've got some saprophytes. I don't know if I brought any mycoremediation species up with me.
Dave, Ganoderma lucidum doesn't grow natively here, does it?
It's moving towards us. Its native range is as far as Virginia, but it grows here. You can grow it here. And they actually haven't found many mushrooms to be like invasive parasites. They really haven't seen a lot of naturalizing parasitical mushrooms moving up and taking over stuff like Japanese knotweed would do, or Norway maple would do. Because trees have those antifungal properties, and because they seem to be able to adapt and deal with the environment, no one's really seemed to throw up any red flags saying, oh, you can't grow this mushroom here because it's going to take over and do like what Norway maple can do, or Phragmites or something like that.
And so lucidum would be on which trees?
Hardwoods.
So like
Oaks, maples, ash. Yeah. But
then-
predominantly, you're going to have to plant them to get them growing. But if you're looking for Ganoderma sugae, you're looking for hemlocks. Yeah. And it's one of the only good mushrooms that actually grow on a physical hemlock. When we're thinking about mycorrhizal species, we can check on a couple out downstairs, but I have some morels. And morels are considered to be slight mycorrhizal. They have a relationship with certain soil types, certain yeasts in the soil, and a lot of times they have certain association with certain tree or plant species. And the mycorrhizal species, like a morel, it likes apple trees. It likes elm trees. It likes white ash trees. So there must be something particular in those soil types. And those are just from around here. Once you start traveling out and beyond, the morels like cottonwoods. They like tulip trees. What else are they around in Iowa?
Beats me.
The beats me tree.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that species. Is that a Midwestern tree?
It's endemic.
Endemic?
So when you see a mushroom growing on a standing tree,
Yeah.
that's indicative of the fact that the tree is dying.
Well, not
Yes.
necessarily. Not necessarily, because some saprophytes, like the black hoof fungus or the artist conch, can actually have a little piece of wood or some bark that's fluffed off or sitting there, and the mycelium will be eating the bark, but won't be penetrating the core of the tree and eating it. It is more of an external saprophyte. It's kind of like an epiphyte on a piece of wood. But there is a capacity that maybe this epiphyte, if the tree gets weak, will continue to go in and eat the dying flesh and maybe help to expedite its process. Yeah. Parasites directly move in, ecto, endo, go in and begin to eat from the inside out. And I mean, it's really cool. You can find trees in the forest that are completely hollow in the center. You know, and they make really awesome fire tubes.
You can find those in my yard too.
Yeah,
We got a lot of them.
you got a lot of hollow trees.
Yeah, maples and apples mostly.
Yeah. So there's some parasitical mushroom that's
Yeah.
in your forest that.
Yeah, you can see them up on some of the branches are dead, and you can see them working there. They look like polypores, actually, most of what I've seen.
Yep. But that actually may not be
Yeah.
the parasite. That may be just feeding off the saprophytical leftover wood. A lot of amaryllis species are parasitical. And there is also chicken of the woods. Have you seen that one before?
I haven't seen it on those trees.
Right, okay. How about honey mushroom? Have you seen any honey mushroom?
What does it look like?
They look like these little brown mushrooms. They have this little kind of opaque brownish cap to them with a little tiny ring on them, and they kind of smell honey-like. They grow on stumpy year after year. Yeah, I'm not quite
most
sure.
of what's visible I've seen are like a polypore. They
Yep.
look almost like a little turkey tail, kind of a grayish, whitish though.
Yep.
But they're kind of frilled out and
Could be the maize.
Small lots of them.
Could be the maize polypore. Could be a turkey tail. There's a bunch of
Yeah, I
different.
have seen turkey tail up there.
Yeah.
For sure.
Could be the split gill polypore. Yeah, could be lots of things. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, our forests, aren't always that healthy, because we don't allow the natural cycle of forests to really kind of happen a lot of times. And a lot of times with new logging practices, they'll come in and they'll take everything from the forest. They'll take all the limbs, they'll take all the leaves, they'll take the whole trunk, they'll take the stump. They'll take it all. And that's really what makes the forest regenerate itself, is living, dying, death, decomposition, life again. It's just that big full circle of life. And that's essentially what your garden is. It's living, dying, death. It's like that whole cycle. It's like we've got this culture of people moving in and bagging all their grass and taking it out of their yard and wondering why they keep on having to fertilize their yard. Well, why not just bag it and leave it on the grass, or just put it in a compost pile and spread grass? It's like my friend who I was talking to about his lawn. I was like, well, why don't you just take that? He said he bought like 4 or 5 yards of nice loam. He was like, well, should I till it in? I was like, no, just rake it all over the top of your whole grass, your garden there, you know. And if you're really afraid of your weeds, then just take cardboard, and I'll get you some mycelium, and then we can just try to get that to become the dominant species of whatever you want to have there. Because he said he wasn't really interested in having grasses. They wanted wildflowers. I was like, boy, well, if you till up that whole thing, you're not going to have a lot of wildflowers. You're going to have a lot of grasses mixed in with wildflowers.
How would you use mushroom in the compost pile if you're always adding to your compost pile?
You've answered your question. If you're always adding to the compost pile, you're always adding stuff that actually the mushrooms will eat.
But don't the mushrooms have to grow outside of the pile?
Well, the mycelium would grow inside the pile.
Correct.
The mushrooms would grow on the outside of the pile.
So you're adding a food source.
Yeah, you're adding another food source to it. And there's two different approaches to composting. There's moldering, which really mushrooms work best with. If it's a really, really hot pile, if you're turning it all the time and keeping it hot, probably not the best realm for mycelia to be working in. So, moldering makes nice black earth, never gets too hot. Where if you're turning it and moving it, and it's always really wet and hot, then it's probably not the best host for a mycelium crop. And there's certain mushrooms that are better in your compost pile than, say, others as well. You know, it's like I wouldn't put shiitake into your compost. I would put like almond portobello or parasol mushroom or shaggy mane or bluet or stropharia or elm oyster. But I wouldn't put like shiitake or lion's mane or hen of the woods because those are more primary decomposers of wood versus lignous matter, wood chips, earth, dirt, all that sort of other stuff.
Do you have a favorite, what's the word, author reference for all this information?
There's a great book by Paul Stamets called Mycelium Running, which is a really good one. There's some really cool books out there created by Gary Linkoff. He's an author. He does books on natural wild mushrooms. He also has a book called Mushroom Hunter. If anyone wants, I brought a few books for sale downstairs. I have a whole bunch of different books. And I also have some different books that aren't for sale that people can just look at and write down the authors of them. But there's more and more books coming out. There's more and more people that have actually started to write books about them. Chelsea Green approached me to write a book. I don't know when I'm going to find time to do that, but maybe someday, you know. My wife's not pregnant again or something, you know. Which, well, I saw on YouTube. Hi, honey.
Dave, when we were together as a group last month, we talked about soil and we talked about water from a permaculture perspective.
Yep.
And could you just talk for a minute or however long you think, just about the mycelium within the soil structure and like some of the things mycelium does around the roots of plants and transferring water and other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, mycelium is really part of the whole Gaia matrix of living, death, and life. And that whole mycelium surrounds, absorbs water, and actually secretes acids and enzymes and helps to regenerate and feed the plants. And in concert, it actually stabilizes soils. It actually surrounds rocks. It actually forms webulous structures throughout lignous matter, cardboard, straw, wood chips. It's really kind of like a bonding stabilizer that also breaks everything down so that, you know, your plants have a good, steady, strong, you know, somewhat erosion-resistant environment that actually can live in. And the whole permacultural model is more based upon building your soils successionally so that you actually get a really strong matrix of living organism within it. It's kind of moving away from the constant tilling of your earth. It's actually just planting through the earth and getting that nice soil matrix that you can actually have the microorganisms in, the worms, the bacterias, the yeasts. You know, inside of a garden, there's a whole matrix of life going on. that's constantly eating, having decompositional processes going on. Flowers come up. The bees come and collect the pollen. The flowers become seeds or tomatoes or plants, and then the waste stream will fall off. Mushrooms will eat it, and then you'll get this beautiful earth that can be just kind of perpetuated throughout your garden for really the rest of your life. You just keep on building your soil, as opposed to every year having to till your garden up and change and really disrupt that whole environment that's going on, chopping up all the worms. Kind of one of the first things that brought me into mushrooms was permaculture. After reading Bill Moyer's book, and now that I've read the Sepp Holzer book too, he has all sorts of fun little things that he does with like mycorrhizal species, trying to perpetuate them. He actually takes mycorrhizal species and hangs them from burlap bags in trees, so that as they're sitting there and rotting and decomposing, either bugs will come and land on these bags and actually get some of the spores and bring them around, or the wind will come and just broadcast them. And that's the really cool thing about mushrooms and permaculture and growing where they're at, is that different mushrooms have different characteristics in their ability to actually spread their spores. There are mushrooms that give off the smell of like rotting flesh. Has anyone heard of the stinkhorn? The stinkhorn mushroom?
Yeah.
Well, the stinkhorn mushroom attracts the smell of rotting flesh, so it attracts flies. And so the flies go into the mushroom, and actually usually get some of their little spore on their little butt, and they just fly away to other places. There are certain mushrooms that actually have to pass through the intestinal process of animals before their spores could then be spread. The honey mushroom is actually one of those mushrooms. It actually likes to be consumed before it's actually spread well. I guess this would be a good time if we shoot out permacultural questions in association with mushrooms.
This isn't so much a permaculture question, but I just want to
Or any mushroom question.
Get it out there before I forget. The on soft ripened cheeses, what kind of fungus is that?
It's either a mold or a fungus,
Okay.
one or the other. And I'm not really sure of that one.
Okay.
I could get in contact with a cheese guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's a bacterium too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think sometimes it is a fungus.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
at least it tastes like, sometimes it'll taste a lot like inoculation. But that doesn't
You've
mean
tried it. You've tried it.
Yeah. Well, it's like on brie.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
The rind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rind on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So
It's almost like a penicilla.
Well, penicillin candidum is one, and geotrichum is another one that you mix in with the milk when you're culturing.
Okay, yeah, because I'm into soft ripened cheeses.
And
Yeah.
there's bacterial culture as well.
Okay.
And kombucha is not a mushroom.
Okay.
It's a bacterial yeast complex. Nobody really knows quite what it is, really.
Cool.
And no one really knows quite where it's from. There's a picture way back from some Buddhist temples of them being given it in a vessel from the gods, and so it's just been kind of passed down and passed down and passed down. So it's one of those mystery substances. Did you have a question, sir?
So if I'm taking a walk in the woods, what would be my rule of thumb on mushrooms? What to eat, what not to eat? Is it based on the trees you talked about?
Well, there's a general guide rule that's huge and all-encompassing. And it's like this. Mushrooms on the ground should be frowned. Mushrooms on a tree are generally good to be, except for in the Deadly Galleria and the Jack-o'-lantern. And a few others too. So no, there's no tried and true. There's no tried and true. Oh, I just know because that's an orange mushroom. Well, there's as many delicious orange mushrooms as there are delicious deadly orange mushrooms.
So you gotta learn.
Yeah, it's like anything. I get people saying to me, "Well, how could you ever possibly pick a mushroom in the forest and I'll be like, well, you go blueberry picking, right? I mean, there's a crowberry, doesn't taste very good, kind of slightly poisonous, but there's a blueberry, they look kind of similar. It's just kind of a knowledge-based thing. You don't go out just picking any willy-nilly plant and eating it, because you'd be picking poison ivy or poison oak, or, deadly nightshade or something. Eat the leaf on rhubarb.
I got it.
So you have to be careful. In the natural world, there are things that will take you out. I mean, you eat some Amanita verosa and you're going to wake up dead.
You're gonna wake up dead.
Yeah. If you believe in the afterlife, right?
I got you.
So, there are mushrooms out there that you have to be very careful of, and there's no old, bold mushroom hunters. There's lots of old mushroom hunters, but there's no old, bold mushroom hunters.
No heroes in the mushroom?
No heroes. There's lots of, and there's not a lot of people. I mean, you probably have as much chance of getting hit by lightning as you get poisoned by mushrooms, unless you're a real risk taker. But there's certain mushrooms, you can take them and put them in certain families, and then you can say, okay, well, this is the Amanita family. There's only 2 of like 28, 30 mushrooms in this whole family that are edible.
Yeah.
The rest of them are either deadly, poisonous, or they'll make you crazy.
Aren't all the polypore mushrooms in this region in the Northeast non-toxic and medicinal?
There's a couple that aren't really that great, like the cinnabar polypore. I haven't heard of any use for that except for making color. But you're right. For the most part, polypores are generally safe to make medicinal teas or tinctures with, or there's a few of them that are soft edibles, like the chicken of the woods, the hen of the woods, the dryad saddle. Those are all soft polypores that you can actually make cuisine out of.
And all polypores are shelf mushrooms?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In the mycorrhizal family, there are the chanterelles, there are the boletus, which look very much like polypores, and by all rights they are polypores because there are little tubes inside as opposed to gills. But the chanterelles, the boletus, the hedgehog mushroom, sweet tooth, those are all within the mycorrhizal properties. They're harder to grow, but with the possible hanging mushrooms from a tree, or by doing the spore bath slurry, that is a way where you can actually maybe propagate a mycorrhizal species where the saprophytical species are much easier to expand because they're primary decomposers. They just eat lignous matter as opposed to have a nice environment where they'll eat the lignous matter, but they also need to have some special friends around it as well to make their growth full.
I'm going to ask the question because it hasn't been asked yet.
What's that?
And it's, can I eat all mushrooms raw, Dave? I eat button mushrooms raw.
Well, we're about the only place in the world that actually eats raw mushrooms. About the only country. This Western culture. So, mushrooms, their whole purpose is to break things down. If we eat a lot of raw breaker downers in our body, they may work towards breaking us down. So, raw button mushrooms aren't really good to be eaten raw. They're best sauteed with olive oil and butter. Certain mushrooms have certain acids in them, have certain things, like the DAcres family has agaritine in them, and agaritine just cannot be broken down by the human body unless it's heat treated. So, it's good to actually saute, slightly cook. You travel to other places in the world and you generally don't see raw mushroom salad bars. Maybe in the American vectors you do, but not in the Thai culture, the Indian, the African. They cook their mushrooms. Europeans, they cook their mushrooms. When you go to a Thai restaurant and you ask them, well, do you cook the mushrooms or do you eat them raw? Well, they cook them. Something to be said. And in the world of biological science, there's a term called Helvig's Law of the Minimum. And Helvig's Law says every living thing has a minimum and a maximum of what it can handle. But we don't know what our individual minimum and maximum is. So according to this law, over the course of a life, if you eat too much of something that's in your maximum, it could be one of those things that could help to bring about a cancer or some sort of illness in the body. So you eat a little button mushroom all in your lifetime, you're probably going to be fine. But if you're a vegetarian and you're eating lots and lots of raw button mushrooms, you may find that there is some side effects. I guess it's up to you to judge that. Find that out.
And button mushrooms really accumulate toxins, so if they're grown in like a contaminated material, then
yeah, and that's the thing about mushrooms is they do uptake heavy metals. So you want to be careful about where you're getting your wood chips from. Maybe you want to be careful about what the earth is you're planting.
And just in the supermarket mushrooms, just meaning like the white button mushrooms can
How do you know?
kind of be poisonous.
How do you know? Yeah.
Where they're from.
You don't know where that soil is coming from. And it needs soil. So they actually have to bring the soil in from somewhere else through these massive 1 and 2 stage steam chambers over like football field size. It's a real big monoculture crop. And actually, there's all these like jokes about mushrooms growing in the dark. Well, it's like 1 or 2 out of somewhat worldwide million. Mushrooms grow in the light. Mycelium grows in the ground.
So does the same go for your supermarket portobello mushrooms or the small cremini mushrooms?
Yeah, cremini and portobello are the same.
Right, one is just younger. Is that
Yeah.
the case?
Yeah.
What are those?
And cremini sometimes are given a little bit of extra light. Some even are telling me, and I don't quite see this yet, but some even say that the button, cremini, and the portobello are all the same, and the button are grown in absolute darkness. That's why they're white. But I haven't seen a grow house of. I don't grow any of them because it's a massive monoculture crop, and they don't get a lot of money per pound. I like to grow things that I can get $10, $30 a pound for. That's good business.
Have we talked about truffles?
Truffle really isn't a mushroom.
It is not.
It's a sclerita. It's a bulb of a mushroom to be. Yep. So, and that's a whole different realm of mycorrhizal and permaculture. Is that we want to plant like apple trees, and maybe we want to plant apple trees and actually have a leg up on the our ability to get morels coming. So we could do a spore bass slurry. We have a nice young apple tree. We do a root dunk. So now we have asexual spores all over the roots, and we can dunk them in. And that's actually how people have actually been experimenting with trying to grow the truffle. Is they'll actually take root dunks of hazelnuts. They'll do root dunks of, there's a pin oak that they've been experimenting with. And then I've heard of a few other species. I just can't remember the tree type. But we don't really have the truffle environment here in the Northeast to get the prized truffles. I guess that more mid-south and then the Pacific Northwest are better areas for truffle habitat. We just don't seem to have the right quite soils, and our winters are a little bit too long up here for them. But the mycelia bundles forms a sclerita in the ground, and that sclerita actually is what's prized. But the sclerita eventually forms a little mushroom. The mushroom isn't that prized. It's edible, but it's not that prized because it's very thin and small. But it's the truffle sclerita which is the prized thing. So that's why, finding something under the ground, like a potato, without any sign of it being there, can be sometimes tricky. And that's where truffle gives off quite a smell, and that's where they've been using dogs or pigs to help get them. Any other thoughts, ideas?
I guess if you had to recommend something, like a book to basically familiarize yourself with just the different ways to pick out mushrooms and figure out what's what, etc. What would you recommend? It seemed that that mushrooms demystified is pretty good.
Yeah, but it's such a wide-scale book on
it is.
on the whole country.
It's kind of bewildering.
Yeah, and there's a lot that can really throw you off because there's so much dedicated to the West.
Yeah.
He has a Northeast book coming out.
Oh, he does. Oh,
he
excellent.
does.
Okay.
Who's that?
David Aurora, and there's also Gary Linkoff has an Audubon Society book, which is quite good.
From the Northeast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Northeast Field Guide. There's a couple other Northeast Field Guides. There's a little book I have downstairs called Mushrooming Without Fear that kind of covers a big category of families of mushrooms so that you can actually isolate certain families, put them into certain things, and go through the processes of identification.
That's
you can't be afraid to go through the key. You can't be afraid to look at the mushroom. You can't be just a picture looker.
Yeah.
Because different mushrooms have different sizes and different shapes. There have been people that have been poisoned by eating primordia, or baby amanitas, thinking they were puffballs. Because at one stage they can look a little tiny bit similar if you're not properly looking at your mushrooms.
Seems like mushroom walks are the best way to go to
Yeah.
go with someone locally.
Yeah. Yes, to pick as many different shapes, sizes, and colors as you can, putting them out on tables, separating them into colors, shapes, sizes, and then just starting to go through the process of thinking, I think I know this is that, and this, okay, now I think I know what it might be. Maybe I've sent it into 2 different types that I think that it might be. And the final thing I do at the end is a spore print. I take the mushroom, I put it on a piece of glass or a piece of black paper or a piece of white paper, cover it with a cup overnight. Sometimes it takes 24 hours, but within that time you've cut off the air to the mushroom, and the mushroom's whole purpose is to throw out spores. So the mushroom throws out its spores, and then the spore, you can see the color, the shape, the angles of how the mushrooms are thrown out, whether it's a gill or a polypore or this tubular or whatever it is. But every single mushroom has different color mushrooms. It's kind of like a thumbprint. So you may have thought that was a bricktop mushroom, which has a kind of peachy looking spore print, but after identifying the spore print, I see that the spore print is green. So that can't be a bricktop. So that's kind of like the last final straw that could break the camel's back. Because if you don't know, you're not really willing to take the risk to see if you do know by eating, then you can do a spore print. And that's a little bit more. And say you still don't feel comfortable, find an expert. Find someone who knows. And you might even have that expert say, I need to talk to some other people first. Because there are certain years that they say, like they said back a couple years ago when we had that really, really long dry spell. There were certain mushrooms popping out during a dry spell that no one had actually ever seen before. It had been so dry that those certain mushrooms needed that dry condition to be able to get them to fruit properly. And there's a doctor up here in Sandwich, Dr. Rick Vanderpool, and he said on the opposite side that rainy year we had with all the hurricanes, it was like 1 in 100 year for the amount of mushrooms were out in the woods. He said they were finding mushrooms that they hadn't seen around for many, many, many years. So, those are mushrooms that people just haven't seen quite as much and may not have as much experience with them, and they'll just kind of go through the whole process of trying to figure it out. And maybe you find a new species and they'll name it after you.
We've still got about 10 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, this is just a good question, answer, chit-chatting, talking. You can grow mushrooms in coffee grounds. You can have a 5-gallon bucket, take your coffee grounds each day, mix it in with a little wood chip spawn of, say, garden giant or Elm oyster or some other sort of mushroom that will like that kind of saprophytic. I mean, the basically breaking down lignous matter, saprophytic properties, and then you could just take that bucket and then just broadcast it out in your environment. You get a nice natural kind of fertilizer, coffee grounds.
Two thoughts or questions about that. So do you have a list you can give us, which you sort of already have, but just for me to like put it in a linear form of like the saprophytes and the mycorrhizals, like those species, and then I'm also thinking like of the seasonal cycle, like pheasant back in the spring and chanterelles in the summer and
I should have that.
lion's mane in the fall.
I should have that for you.
In the book he's gonna write, it will be there.
I have a handout downstairs, but it doesnent have that. But thank you, because I will write that up, because I should have thought about that for this course, because I remember Eric Torsmeyer had little notes on different ones at certain times of the year.
Right.
I think in Dave Jackie's book he does cover some of that.
Okay.
The medicinal forest garden mushroom book, and Sepp Holzer's book has a little bit of that, the permaculture one. If you go into any of the guidebooks, they're very good about telling you, if you just look up chanterelle, well, generally what time of year is it found? What type of environment is it often found in?
Mm-hmm.
Field, grassy knoll, forest, swamp, exposure, what it generally kind of likes. But thanks for that feedback, because that would be a good thing that I could bring to courses. That would be a good thought.
From the mushrooms that were in the presentation on the screen, could you just maybe recap I have lion's mane, morel, elm oyster, Berkeley polypore.
Sure. Throw out names and I'll give you
which season did you harvest?
Sure. Lion's mane is a fall mushroom.
Yep.
Sometimes when you're trying to propagate it, it can pop out in the early spring if it's moist. We seem to be getting a pattern of early spring dryness. You guys seem to be getting that up here still too?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then it's dry, and then all of a sudden we get a lot of rain. So it's kind of neat to see what happens. Lion's mane is a fall mushroom. Oysters, there's a whole gambit of different oysters. There's blue oysters, which is a fall and early spring mushroom. There's the pearl oyster or the eastern oyster, which is a early spring and a fall mushroom. There's the elm oyster, and the elm oyster is like a mid-summer, late summer mushroom. It seems to like that time of year. There's a cashew oyster, and the cashew oyster is a slight brown oyster, and it actually can grow in somewhat summertime. It can actually grow in the 80s, high 70s and 80s.
How do you spell that?
Caju. It is a Ostreatus columbinus species, I believe. The garden giant mushroom is more of a early summer, late spring, late summer into fall mushroom. There's another mushroom called the bluet, and it's kind of a bluish mushroom, kind of purplish color, and it's a really awesome leaf, wood chip, and compost decomposer, and that is a fall mushroom. Another mushroom that I've been working with is the almond portabella, and it can grow in your gardens and underneath your perennial plants, and it actually doesn't mind the early summer and late summer. Grows underneath the plants. There's a parasol mushroom that I've been fruiting, and that's more of a little hot spikes in the summer, like thunderstorm complexes, but not long duration of big like that 94-degree temperature we had the other day, that little spurt for a couple of days. It likes those temperatures, but it doesn't like 5 days of 100. So that's kind of right there. Shiitake, it actually has the ability to do all 3 seasons. There are cold weather shiitake, there are wide range shiitake, there are cold weather shiitake. So you can grow them at all times of the year. The hen of the woods is more of a fall mushroom. Morels, they are a spring mushroom, pretty much spring alone. April and say May is pretty much the morel season. Some mine's early June. Early June this year because it's been still kind of cool now. We got snow last week. It was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Let's see some others. Chicken of the woods. That seems to be it likes a little bit of heat. So it's kind of a spring, summer, fall. Kind of those are kind of good for that time of year. What else? I have another mushroom. I don't have any spawn with me of it today, but I'm going to do some more experimenting with it. It's called the chestnut mushroom. It's a Amarilla adiposa species, and it actually likes wood. You could do like what they call log rafting. You could take a bunch of logs and just put wood chips between the logs, and then just kind of make a little, kind of almost like a hugelkultur. Has anyone heard of hugelkultur before? Yeah, basically just trying to take lignous matter, wood chips, logs, branches, and trying to make earth. It would kind of like that environment, likes that kind of matrix. There's a lot of mushrooms out there. You can grow enoki. You can grow enoki in the woods, but that's more of a fall mushroom if you want to grow them in the woods. If you want to grow them in a grow house, you could actually grow enoki in the middle of the wintertime. It actually likes fruit and temperatures that are like between like 48 and 55 degrees. So you could put a shade cloth on a greenhouse in the wintertime and maybe get those temperatures achieved.
I was going to ask you, what's a mushroom grow house look like?
It looks like a room like this. Looks like a greenhouse, but it likes a little shade cloth, and it likes wicked high humidity. 80 to 100% humidity. Yeah. Because mushrooms are water creatures. They love moisture, humidity. It's what makes up their makeup.